to our deep dive today. That was supposed to be last week's, but for this week, it's kind of all about really, I would say we kind of took two categories: podcasts and TVs. Um, Podcast is the first thing I guess we'll touch on, and I don't think people really understand the podcast game and kind of where it's going. Podcasts traditionally were not very popular. I think Serial might have been the thing that made it a big deal a couple years back. And then I think the pandemic made podcasts extremely popular. Everyone and their mom made a podcast. We made a podcast, right? So I mean, it became a popular way to get a message out there, go direct to your audience, and connect with them. But podcasts were always traditionally a very open system. Everything was based on RSS feeds. You basically just subscribe to the player of your choice, and you get your pieces of information. But now there's been a big, I would say, I won't call it consolidation, but there's been a big drive by bigger platforms, specifically, I would say, probably Amazon, Spotify, and even first-party apps like NPR, Wondery, these types of, I guess Amazon bought Wondery, but regardless, NPR I know is a big one of this too. But basically, these guys are all getting into the first-party podcast game. And it's, Joe Rogan made like 100 million, for example, right? Do you think that Spotify paid Joe Rogan 100 million to have Joe Rogan on his platform? Not so much. He was already on the platform. People could already listen to Joe Rogan shows on Spotify if they wanted to, but they wanted to exclusively get those 10 million, 11 million, 20 million, however many subscribers that he has to get on him, get Spotify accounts, provide their information, take all their listening history and things along those lines, and monetize that. Think about that. You've picked up 11 million essentially users that are you now have data on, right? I mean, sorry, we're flipping through slides because I'm kind of going on a rant here, but one of them was about Spotify revenue. The 600% something caught my eye. But yeah, broadly speaking, podcasts, there's a lot of collection and a lot of data that's being used on podcasts that people don't realize. And the point of the rant was really about ads, because everybody realizes podcasts have ads. And I don't think people realize how those ads are generated and why they get the ads that they get. Generally, there's a couple of different types of ads in a podcast. You'll have the ones, that are static, which means the host is baked into the audio and it's directly part of it. And, generally the podcast host has a relationship with the advertiser and they work out a deal and they just say it as a part of this. Like, you know what, go check out soandso.com. They make this great product. But what a lot of people don't realize is what you might think is a natural ad might actually be a dynamic ad where the podcast host has recorded maybe 100 different advertisements. And then through some system of bidding and auctioning and just like how ads show up on Google or whatever, they'll dynamically insert certain ads in your podcast listening. And I go back to the Joe Rogan thing as well, because Joe Rogan went to Spotify and I'm a Spotify premium subscriber and I get ads at the beginning of the podcast, in the middle of the podcast, which makes absolutely no sense because I'm a paying Spotify subscriber and they don't even care. And people complain, but Spotify doesn't care because people will still listen or, still have their Spotify subscription. So I'll wrap up that rant with just what are your thoughts on the podcast game in general and what you have seen from the news and things along those lines.
I'm just going to put this up. This is why there's so much emphasis on podcasts and advertising and insertion and all the things that Tejas had talked about. Look at the damn growth. I mean, this thing is meteoric. And like you said, Amazon is starting a podcast network. Spotify has got theirs. I mean, almost everybody, there's a video live stream. There's social or drop-in audio. There's podcast. And what is it all? It's not only content, it's attention. This is why these platforms are spending all this money and giving this ungodly amount of money to Joe Rogan, because he has a huge audience and he can keep their attention. And when you got attention, you can convert that attention into what? Ads and sales. And so this is why, when you hear things like we're going to collect less data on you, how is that really possible when all this money is at stake? Because attention drives everything. It drives these deals. And so podcasts have had this meteoric kind of rebirth because people are all into them. And then, Substack has bought a podcast network. It's all content it's all about attention and all about how to monetize that attention through buying data, through encrypting data, through less use of collection of data. Yeah, it all does not add up when you see numbers like this.
Well, the sad thing, it goes back to one of the points we discussed early on in one of those early episodes, right? How much brain power, PhDs to whatnot, thousands of smart people are trying to figure out how to insert ad into something. I say what a waste of resources. And I see this entire generation, the last 10 years or so, as a significant waste of smart people's resources, because we are heading down this path of how to run ads and how to make someone watch an ad or a click on ad. Significant waste of resources. Yeah, it's actually sad.
It pays a lot though.
Wow.
That's how they keep you, right?
I mean, I'm just popping up these talking points here. Ad revenue for podcasts increased more than 40% last year and is projected to top 800 million. The whole privacy game is this trying to find the right mix of privacy and ad revenue potential that will keep, the general population not happy, not mad, but okay with what's going on. And that's, because when you hear about all these kind of things, the nods to privacy, it's nods to privacy with the caveat of we still got to make money on ads. And if people are honest about it, that's okay. But when you try to sound like you're doing this all in the name of customer data privacy, it causes us to react and say, well, really? Are you sure about that? I think if they would be more honest and open about, yeah, it's good for us, and we're going to try to restrict privacy as much as we can while still making a buck. I don't know. I think people would at least feel that's a fair assessment of what we're getting into with this stuff.
Yeah, people just don't know, I guess, what they're giving up. I mean, in the podcast world, essentially, you would basically upload a file, and then people would just subscribe to that feed, and those files, audio files, would get downloaded to your phone or a computer or whatever, right? But when you make that download, and now there's all these podcast hosting platforms that do hosting, but then at the same time do advertising, basically it tracks your IP address of where you're downloading it from. That means they have your location. They can get time of day, the device, previous downloads from that same IP, collect that and associate it with other anonymized or de-identified data from other sources, and they know exactly what you're doing. And then that's where those ads end up being more valuable. So something that I guess ultimately the point is really like, you think a podcast is a very simple thing and there's no data you're really giving up and it's just what it is. But it is kind of scary because you have no idea what's happening in the background. And the reason these bigger players are getting involved in it is because you want to control that distribution and collect more data points and connect it to more data points, right? That's the Google game. That's the Spotify game. That's the Amazon game. I guess we can only bet that Facebook gets into some audio type of situation or podcast as well too, right? There's no reason to leave that money on the line. It'll be a part of the metaverse.
Yeah. By the way, Esteban makes a very, very good point here. He talks about people will just simply ignore it. I mean, that happens. I know that happens to me subconsciously, where when I'm reading an article, all the ads that are around it, are kind of fading out. I mean, of course, I prefer the reader mode in Safari, but you automatically tune out with all of these, and that's what I do when I watch something. Whenever there is an ad that is playing on TV, that's when I hit the mute button. So I always have the TV remote with me, because only after the ad is done I unmute it, and people will figure that out and tune out, and the conversion ratio will significantly drop down. That's what when you're bombarded with a lot of ads.
I mean, I'm sure there was stuff a while ago about the effectiveness of ads. I think Facebook's last report was like inventory went up 6%, but ad revenue went up like something like 40%. And there's a lot of debate about just the effectiveness of these ads, because if you're getting ads inserted in so many different ways and you're spending so much money on them, at a certain point, people do just like what Raju said. I do the same thing. I think a lot of people, not even privacy conscious people, just people who are annoyed with ads, do the same thing, right? Block through everything and skip it. And whoever that advertiser has spent $10, $20, $30 for that impression, and it was completely useless, right?
Yep.
Hey, Tejas?
Yeah.
What about TV? As I set you up to talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, what Roger talked about when it comes to TV ads, I guess people don't really realize what's going on with TV ads. What do you call it? Everybody has smart TVs nowadays. It's virtually impossible to buy a TV that's not connected to the internet or doesn't have some smart capabilities. And if you do, they're generally pretty expensive or pretty terrible quality. And all of these TVs, the first thing usually during setup, you connect it to the Wi-Fi, do an update or download your apps. And you'll get like either the YouTube app or you'll get your YouTube TV or Sling TV or any of these streaming services installed on your TV. And now that your TV is connected to the internet, you might get ads through those apps themselves, but that's separate from what the TV manufacturer is collecting about you. And when I went down this rabbit hole of what TVs collect on you, it was the scariest thing I think I've ever seen, because there is this technology called active or automatic, one of the two, ACR, active content recognition. And Vizio got busted for this a while ago. Samsung's big in the game. Sony's big in the game. LG is big in the game. Every major TV provider you can think of. And what active content recognition basically does is every interval, maybe 1 second, 30 seconds, whatever, it'll take a clip of your TV, a screenshot essentially, beam it up to their servers, match that screenshot with the time, location of where you are so they know what you're watching, and then associate that with a TV show, a user profile connected to other data sources, and they can target you with an advertisement within 30 seconds of the content being displayed on the screen. So that means if you're watching YouTube TV, basically YouTube TV knows exactly, or let's not use YouTube because that's a Google thing and too easy of an example. Let's use like Sling TV. Sling, the TV itself will track what you're watching, know exactly who you are, and then those commercials you see during your break are not like some blanket commercial that everybody in the US or everyone in your region is seeing. Those are custom tailored to you based on data that they've collected about you. And connecting your TV, if there's one thing I would tell people that to protect your privacy is, for the love of God, you have to go into your home, go into your TV settings, do a factory reset, and never connect your TV to the internet. Like that is the easiest thing to do to kind of try to protect yourself a little bit. But then the fear of unplugging your TV is what Brent just put up right here. A lot of the streaming services or sticks or media players that you connect to your TV, those are ad devices in themselves. So Roku is not a company that makes media players or streaming set-top boxes. They're an advertising company that happens to make hardware. It's not a hardware company that happens to do advertising. Same thing with your Amazon Fire Stick. You're going into the Amazon ad system. You get a Chromecast TV, you're in the Google ad system. I guess Apple TV is the only other one that kind of does some semi-tracking, but yeah, like there's no safe place in streaming content because everything is tracked, and every one of those devices is essentially made from some sort of ad platform, because that's how they make money. These numbers are wild, Brent. Like, I mean, this was just the craziest thing I've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Really at the beginning, isn't it? I mean, they're just digging into the numbers here, because go back to this guy here. It says 2 significant steps in advancements TV happened Monday. That was March 1st. That wasn't all that long ago. What's going to be the advancements going forward about how they're able to capture devices? And you got devices in your in your car, and you got devices in your house, and they have screens, and they're anytime they're on and people are watching them, data is being collected.
Yeah. So I mean, can't reiterate the point they just made enough. Do not connect your TV directly to the network, because the first thing they do is obviously download whatever they want to download from the network. The number two, they are also scanning all the devices that you have in your house, and all that information goes in there. They know how many Apple devices or a Samsung devices, how many other TVs they have, and every single piece of information is being streamed, just like they're scanning local networks, right? That's what all these other systems do, like your smartphone, your or your other so-called smart devices or smart assistants. They scan all these things and ship it out. That's additional data point. And then on top of it, the point they just mentioned is about scanning the content. I think there was one of those cases where maybe it was Samsung or some other thing. It's taking the screenshots of some of the content that you're watching and then sending it back into their service, and they're processing it, and then based on the content, analyzing the content, they're pushing an ad to you. Those are all scary stuff. I mean, that is on the consumer side. Now imagine on the business side of things. People have TVs deployed now in conference rooms and whatnot, and they may or may not even realize that these are not these are connected to the network, and they may not be as secure as they think they are. I mean, I had to call some of the people I know to basically disconnect the TVs from the internet in a business, so that there's no leak there. But all of this is a very scary topic, and that has to be addressed.
I remember, Raju, when we had the office back on 35 a couple years ago, we got these Vizio TVs for the conference room. And back then, Vizio TVs for a couple of years, 2017-ish, probably when that lawsuit happened, they didn't come with remotes. And so you had to use the app, which means you had to connect the TV to the internet in order to even control the TV. There was like buttons physically on the TV, but there was no like remote, which was just mind blowing at the time. And it seemed like it made sense. And, just use your phone. It's great. But then you realize this is why. And Jeffrey brought up how Vizio was caught listening in on people. And that was back in 2017. And in that article that Brent put up there for a quick second, one of the lines from it says, Vizio captured as many as 100 billion data points every single day from millions of TVs. So billions of data points daily from millions of TVs. And that's in 2017, when you can only imagine the growth and the expansion of connected TVs nowadays. So that's quite a number. I mean, each one of these on the screen here shows how many devices that they're talking to and partnerships they have for their ad networks, right?
Yeah, can I just mention, what the hell is Alfonso? I don't even know what Alfonso is. And they got 15 million opted in U.S. smart TV households. There's names that I'm not familiar with, and they're collecting all sorts of stuff. I might have some kind of device or TV that has this running in the background. I have no idea at this point what's going on with all this.
And another point that Jeff mentioned, like he was talking about Nielsen, paying $10 for that's a rabbit hole in itself. It'll be good to ask the question: how does Nielsen get all this data? Who are all the vendors and sources that is sending the data to Nielsen and whatnot? That is all the data brokers, and it is a data racket in itself.
I mean, if they can afford to pay you $10 a month, think about what they're making, right?
And think about Nielsen. They are totally addicted. Their business is from the beginning is all about this data. Now it's just getting easier and easier to collect it for them. That's pretty much their game.
Yeah. In my case, I basically, I don't use any third-party thing except Apple. I mean, I don't connect my TV directly, just Apple TV, and of course, I don't enable the Siri to whatnot. That is where not connecting is the best solution in this case, unless you use it. I know Brett probably has 15 Alexa devices running in his room.
I was getting ready to say, I've been doing all this harsh talking on, and I just watched like Netflix last night. We're streaming on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, as I always like to say. But it's like, for me, just be upfront with me and let me make the decision whether I'm cool with you knowing certain things, because I'm also cool with getting the things that you're offering. But a lot of this is still done under, behind doors, under the table. And to me, that's the biggest negative. Just let us know what you're doing. Now, if you feel like you're doing something underhanded or think something that people aren't going to buy, guess what? They probably won't. But if you know how to, position or message correctly, you might be surprised at how much you still might get, and then you don't have to feel like you're, doing a covert op just to get what you want. But I think that's the hardest part of this whole thing is, you guys, I mean, these companies, you got to just be honest and make a good case for why you want what you want.
And that goes back to the first story we discussed about, Brent, which is the Apple story. One of the reasons people were mad is, they did not sign up for this, right? Where they were scanning a few things. Did you inform this while I bought the device and whatnot? This is also the default opt-in is the issue, right? So that is the issue with AirTags. You're opted in. You don't even have an option to opt out of that network. So the same thing, there's no opt-out of Apple scanning all these devices, and Facebook is probably screaming there saying, why do you want to provide that option to my apps and is not available at the platform level? And that's a good question.
Yeah, one of the issues is also people have gotten comfortable with kind of like the advertising subsidized cost structure of certain things. Like, you can get a Roku 4K streaming stick for like $30 or something like that, right? And the reason you get it is because they sell that hardware at a loss because they're going to make the money on the back end, right? Now, if you went and told people now that streaming stick is going to be $100, $150 or something like that, they might not be too happy, and they might argue, you're pricing people out of a market or not giving them, I don't know, some fundamental right or something along those lines. But even if you offered like two separate versions and says, give me like a locked down version and give me a non-locked down version or something along those lines, right? The Roku story is just wild because their business has been booming, and you have to go through like all sorts of hoops in order to turn off like the enhanced TV experience, I think is what they call it, right? So that's that honesty aspect. Like, just tell me what you're doing. You're collecting everything about me, and in exchange, I'm giving you a cheap device, right? Just be straight. Yeah. And that's all you really need to do. And I think you would earn a lot more goodwill with people, because I still think there's plenty of people who would take that trade because they see the value in it, and some people that won't. And you kind of make everybody happy, and both sides will end up trusting you, right? At least you're honest about what's going on.
Yeah, and two different paid models: pay with your data or pay with money. Pick one. And these are strictly different. But I mean, that could go down the rabbit hole of like privacy being, for the wealthy and not so much for developing countries or lower income people. It's kind of a scary precedent to set in that regard as well, right?
Well, at least YouTube says you have YouTube Premium, which I pay for, which is ad free. But as Tejas would point out, that does not necessarily mean they're not collecting data. But at least I don't have to be bothered with the ads. And for me, that's worth the trade-off.
For now.
And that's good for me. For now.
I mean, but as Tejas has pointed out, if Spotify is able to show ads in the podcast while he's paying for a subscription, well, certainly Spotify is leading the way and showing the path for YouTube.
Well, YouTube has already done that, because if you notice, I watch a lot of these creator folks. They give a lot of content, but if you notice, in the middle of their videos, they have outside sponsors. They're not advertisers, they're sponsors, and they basically run an ad or a commercial / testimonial right in their video, which has nothing to do with the YouTube ad network stuff.
Those make more money, right? You get 100% of that revenue versus splitting it with Google if you rely on their ads, right? And you control that relationship rather than YouTube owning it. I guess we're kind of running short on time here, so we'll wrap it up. But one thing we definitely got to put in the show notes is Consumer Reports has a really good article that has a list of basically how to opt out of active content recognition for TVs on a majority of TV platforms like Sony, LG, Vizio, whatever. It's a little bit of a painstaking process for each TV, but we'll be sure to throw that up there or in the notes somewhere at some point, or add a comment or find a way to get it out there. If you Google or DuckDuckGo preferably, Consumer Reports, how to turn off TV snooping, you should be able to figure it out and find the link. But yeah, podcasts are scary. TV's even scarier. The world is scary, and all you can really do. The last thing I'll mention, Jeffrey mentioned he uses a 30 version of the Roku. The real way to really stick it to people like Roku is you buy the Roku, get the subsidized device, but then get like a Pi hole or something to block all the data out of it. So they're not getting any residual value out of it, and I'm getting the device for cheap. And that's why kind of a lot of these tech tinkerers will go and like flash Android devices or install like custom OSs and things like that, because you're going to take the cheap device, but we'll turn off the data funnel on our own from a network perspective. But then again, if you're technical, you can figure that stuff out.